Hey, what's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to a brand new video today to discuss some new 2019 rules being pushed forward for F1, specifically aerodynamics-wise. We already learnt about the new fuel regulations allowing a bit more fuel in that car, and also to do with driver weight being not included in the weighing process of the car. We talked about that on the podcast, a week or so ago, but at that point there were no kind of hints if there would be any major aerodynamic changes for 2019. It appeared that there was some resistance from teams really wanting to change that. Obviously, those changes were in a bid to try and help overtaking. And so this morning, the FIA actually put out a little briefing that said the rules were going to go ahead and there are actually going to be some changes, and they were approved by an e-vote. So that's a little bit weird. I haven't heard that one before. Teams voting or the FIA voting basically electronically before. Usually, it's always a case of there's sort of like time delay. They always have to meet in person right before a race weekend. And usually, more often than not, there's a couple of teams that disagree, and then sometimes Ferrari come in with their kind of veto vote. But to my surprise, at least, I don't know about you guys, but it appears to be going ahead, even though with some resistance. They've got approved e-votes. I'm assuming also from Ferrari, or I don't exactly know the ins and outs. I don't know how a couple of weeks ago it sounded like Ferrari and a couple other teams were going to be against this idea, and somehow now it's going ahead. I don't know. I don't quite understand that, but anyway, we're going ahead, and what they approved on, and what we've been told in the kind of little briefing outline they posted online is it's not super detailed, but essentially simplified front wings with a larger span and low outwash potential, simplified front brake duct with no winglets, and a wider and deeper rear wing. So let's go into that a little bit, because that's not very detailed. You can't really get an idea of maybe what these cars are going to look like. So I thought I'd make this video to try and maybe have some insight into what we might be able to expect from F1 2019 and kind of just discuss it as a whole. I want to know your guys' thoughts. Do you think this is a good direction for Formula 1? Obviously, it's to aid overtaking, so in my mind, that's always a good thing, and we've talked so many times about the formula we've got at the moment is getting a little bit too complex, especially at the front end of the car, where dirty air is just playing too big of a factor at most circuits where it's not a Baku or it's not a China where there's maybe that long straight, especially Baku, obviously, where there's that long straight where they can get such a big toe. We're going to the next circuit at Catalonia, the place where they went pre-season testing, and so many times we talk about dirty air problems there. I'm thinking off the top of my head, Brazil's obviously quite a big one, but there are numerous circuits where last year overtaking was just an issue. We had so many times drivers having to back off outside of Delta because the car was getting too warm, because they couldn't follow the cars close enough in the corners, and these kind of changes are in a bid to try and help that, and also just help the overtaking process. Because let's start off with the kind of simplest one, which will be the wider and deeper rear wing. Don't need much illustration on that. It's essentially just going to be a little bit wider overbearing on the rear tyres and a bit of a bigger, deeper arch on the actual main plane flaps, and that will actually effectively add more downforce to the rear of the car. But then if you think about it, when they open DRS as well, that'll actually open up the effect of DRS. It'll make it a bit more powerful, actually, because if all the rear wings are deeper and wider, producing a bit more downforce, you can imagine when the DRS flap opens, that's a larger flap opening up. There's a lot more air passing through compared to the car ahead of the car with the DRS open, and so effectively it does improve actually the effect of DRS without having to extend the straight that DRS is available for. And then also in the corners puts a bit more emphasis on the rear end perhaps compared to the front end, because we are simplifying the front wings apparently in 2019. But let's first of all start off with where we are in 2018. Here's the Mercedes in Baku. Very complex front wing. You can clearly see many cascade elements. You've got, those overbearing arch flaps that I've talked about many times in Let's Talks when the cars launch, and also in the tech roundups we've done so far, trying to get air around to the side of the tyre. We'll actually have a little illustration. So in yellow, you've got kind of where the air is moving. So in the kind of more towards the inside of the front wing on the main plane here, you've got vortices tailing off on the edge of the flaps. You've got the tip vortices on the edge of these upper elements and the cascade elements here. But this is kind of the main chunky and juicier bit of the front wing where we are right now in 2018. Is a lot of these teams now, ever since 2014, tail end of 2013, trying to get this kind of arch shape going on the end of the front wing, trying to essentially use the front wing less so as a downforce producing device and very much a flow control device, trying to channel air to this edge of the front tyre, where a vortex naturally forms anyway. anyway. Even with the very simple plank of wood-esque kind of front wing, a vortex will naturally be formed here anyway if it's put in front of a front tire. It's just the way the interaction is between the front wing and the tire. But now what they're trying to do is they're trying to create that vortex. But what they've been trying to do for years now is trying to make that vortex as powerful as they can, trying to push air from the front to just where a lot of air would usually build up at what would be a stagnation point as the air just hits the front tire, trying to just move that about and concentrate that to the same place where the vortex is naturally being formed anyway on the side wall of the front tire. At the same time with the end plate, that's exactly also what they're trying to do, especially with the tip vortices, trying to make the tip vortices as strong as they can on the end plate and eventually trailing down. And the stronger they can get that vortex on the outside of the tire, the better it's going to be for the entire downstream of the car. It's going to try and clean up the turbulent air coming off the front tire, try and control that essentially, try and move it away, induce mixing as the vortex goes downstream. It's going to basically be like an injection of much more concentrated vortex air hitting the turbulent air coming off the front tire, trying to induce that mixing, which will try and make the air smoother as air mixes about. And as it goes down towards the barge board area where you've got the end plate side pods, as I like to say, towards the inside is quite important as well. You have multiple vortices being made that are going to go directly towards the under tray of the car, the barge board, the brake duct. So you can see kind of here on the right hand side, you can kind of imagine them lining up the cascade elements with the winglets on the brakes. You can see just here with my mouse there, one winglet there on the actual brake duct housing itself, trying to line that up with the cascade elements so that when the tip vortex comes off the front wing, it's also then going to slap bang interact with the winglet on the brake then, and you can see where I'm going. Obviously downforce is made anyway on the front of the car because the underside of all these flaps is going to create downforce, but a lot of it is now flow control all the way to the rear of the car. And so that's an issue when it comes with a car following another car in dirty air. You have the hot exhaust gases, and then you also have all the air I talked about that's being chucked to the side of the car and coming off the rear tires. That's all turbulent air. That's all chucking through, mixing with that hot exhaust gas, and when it hits the front of the following car, it's not coming at you nice and smooth as free stream air would. Also, the hot air plays into it, especially for cooling for the brakes. That's why you hear a lot of the time drivers not wanting to stay within 1 second of another car if they can't, foresee a pass being made. If it's been a couple of laps and they're still not getting past the guy, they usually tend to back off a little bit, try and cool down the brakes, cool down the tires, and basically essentially reconvene, reassess their options, and maybe try something different, whether that be a strategy pass or once again just maybe charging up ERS, charging up the battery, and going at it again. But they make that gap happen because otherwise the car is getting too hot and the entire front end of the car is not performing as it should do if it wasn't there behind another car it's chasing. So the simplified front brake duct part with no winglets, you can see where they're going with that. So there will be less of a need for the teams then to put on extra cascade elements to kind of line up with these brake duct winglets. Also, just removing them anyway, even if we're not talking about the front wing, removing these winglets on the brake ducts anyway just also alleviates any kind of air movement the teams can do on the brake. And I kind of agree with it. It means the brake duct is just simply put a brake duct. Obviously, they're not getting rid of the team's ability to do a blown wheel nut, which is letting air pass straight through the brake duct and going straight through the wheel nut. That's all fine by the FIA because that also doesn't really affect too much the importance of aero coming in. It's more of a case of it's just going through it would be going through the brake duct anyway. The team are just, choosing to send some of it straight through the wheel nut. So I think that's fine. The winglets, though, are more of an issue of that's not the winglets don't need to be there in the brake duct, so the FIA are going to say, no, you can't have them. You can't have the simplified front wings. As I said, we don't have any details, but I imagine what they're going to go with is trying to remove a lot of these cascade elements. Also, especially maybe this kind of tunnel effect they have going on, somehow trying to deter teams from designing the front wing like that. I imagine they're going to have like certain restrictive 3D boxes, essentially, kind of 3D space in the air, where they're saying you can't have certain elements, cascade elements at this certain height, perhaps, to try and basically remove that opportunity for the teams. And then the kind of other one is the larger span and the low outwash potential. The low outwash potential, that part of the kind of press briefing is essentially what I was talking about, trying to stop the teams needing the outwash of the air towards the outside of the front tires. And the larger span, well, essentially that's nothing new actually. We used to have that. Remember back to 2009, from 09 to 2013, we had a larger span front wing. The end plate used to be aligned essentially with this right-hand side sidewall of the front tire. Then from 2014 onwards, they've had it just a bit inwards, about, I would say, 1/3 into the front tire. And before 2009, '08 backwards, they used to have the front wings even more. I can't exactly remember off the top of my head, but I think it used to be almost about a third of the way on the front tire, or even further in. So it's nothing different. Spans have changed many, many times over the years in Formula One. This is quite important. If they move it all the way to the edge, outside edge of the front tire, it means that the teams would not have to work harder anyway to move that air, because you can see what's happening right here is any air that's coming in this region, the teams don't want it just to hit the front tire and create a stagnation point, create higher pressure, and just essentially be chucked off left and right and not really be put to any use. So that's why they're doing this tunneling effect, to push it to the outside and become useful. And that problem's still going to be there, but the reason why they're always chucking it to this right-hand side is because it's so difficult to affect this area of air, essentially, when the front wing is narrower than the span of the tyres. But by making the span equal to the span of the tyres, it means it's an easier time to start affecting this, because you can imagine in this end plate here, instead of it having to be curved, if you follow my mouse, curved from here all the way to here, kind of in a U shape almost, an L shape if you look from top down. Instead of it needing to be curved to actually chuck the air outwards, if you can imagine the end plate is in line with the edge of this tyre, it can just be straight, and the tip vortex can actually still play a part then in this vortex on the side of the tyre. So the teams won't necessarily need to do that much to affect that vortex anymore. And with the restrictions that FIA, I assume, are going to put in, the teams won't be able to do that. So all you'll be left with is a simple looking front wing, perhaps with just a multiple array of flaps, 5, 3, whatever you want it, 5 flaps going across to the entire span of the front wing and just meeting a simple end plate. And that, a simpler front wing, in theory, means that when a car is following another car, it'll be less of an effect. It'll still be affected. You can't really get rid of the problem that is dirty air, especially in Formula One cars with the way everything's set up with the rear end and just the general trying to get air from the front to the back. But they're trying to dampen the issue that arises when you try and follow a car, especially in a corner. And then also, when you're going down the straight, I talked about the DRS effect on the rear end. Also at the same time, on the front end, just going in a straight line, if it's a simpler front wing, you're creating a little bit less drag at the front there, and so the car can hopefully get a bit better slipstream as it tries to overtake the car and pull, get closer and closer to it to eventually pull out and make the pass. So they're trying to improve overtaking with all these measures, and we don't have many details, but that's how I imagine they're going to play this. And it's going to be all about how they box in these restrictions, because remember, when the FIA wanted to make the noses lower, they had issues. We had those kind of, oblong noses. We still have the stub noses, and that's due to the FIA having these kind of boxes in 3D of where the car can be and can't be, but there are loopholes the team always find, and I imagine the teams will still find loopholes in whatever kind of new technical regulations the FIA concoct for 2019, but they're trying their best, and they're still saying, according to the press briefing, still looking into other ways and a range of other measures aimed at encouraging closer racing and boosting overtaking Formula One. We'll see what those are. Maybe they'll come out later in the year, but for now, that's what we've got. No concrete details. Hopefully, we do get more details as the weeks and months go on. But exciting times, because I think, we talked about it on the podcast, in the Pit Lane podcast, myself, Callum, and Tom, about how, it's kind of a needed. Playing devil's advocate, I can also appreciate anyone maybe not liking the change, because I myself also, I like it. I like, I'm a bit of a F1 nerd when it comes to, I like the techie side of F1. I love to look at the complex wings. It makes the cars look more like rocket ships when you see all these little bits and bobs on the front end, on the side of the car, on the rear of the car. But ultimately, it's for the greater good. I guess it's for the greater good. Are there better areas to improve the car, to improve overtaking? Yes, but FIA have chosen the front end and chosen the rear end and the front wing and the wings on the front and the rear of the car rather than those areas. So you just have to kind of take it as it is. I've already seen a few people on Twitter kind of say this is the wrong area to be looking at. We should be looking at other areas of the car to improve the overtaking. But this is what the FI want to go with for now for 2019. And I guess this is almost, like I said it on the podcast, an experiment in a way of trying to see what works right now before they kind of ratify any big moves for rule changes for the big 2021 date where everything can really shake up with the engine, with the cars as well. And so they're trying their best to tweak it and see what works. And so I'm going to be all for this. I'm excited to see what the FIA come up with the restrictions and what then the teams are going to do in terms of they always like to try and poke around and counteract it and still try and find the downforce and try and control the air as best they can with what they've got. So it's going to be interesting times. And I kind of like the fact that at least the cars are going to look, quite different at the front end then. Because this year, compared to 2018, not much change, to be honest. It was just the halo, really, and the kind of, less of a shark fin, but nothing else really changed too much. And so I always like it from year to year when Formula One cars change a bit more drastically. It's kind of just more exciting in a way, season to season, that there are bigger changes. Otherwise, it kind of feels a bit too samey. I don't know. Any of these kind of things I'm talking about, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Obviously, that's another point of the video. Trying to get your thoughts. Do you kind of like the news of the simpler front wings, the wider rear wings, and also do away with the winglets on the brakes? Or are you kind of on the other end? You want to see F1 be the kind of pinnacle of technicality? You think they should have all these kind of winglets and everything like that, and they shouldn't be trying to artificially maybe change it and simplify it? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. Playing a bit of devil's advocate there. Let's see what you guys think, and let's try and get a bit of a discussion going. But if you did enjoy the video and found it somewhat informative, then hit that like button, guys. If you are new around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Formula One content. I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.